It's time now to take a look at stories making headlines on Nigerian newspapers, and I begin with the blueprint. The major story here says Yakubu on 2023 at Chatham House. Why INEC is prepared for runoff presidential election. Yakubu on 2023 at Chatham House. Why INEC is prepared for runoff presidential election. All right, you can find all the details of that story on the front page of the Blueprint newspaper. To this Nigerian newspaper now. Why Nigerians in diaspora can't vote, INEC Chair Yakubu explains at Chatham House, says election will hold as scheduled. Why Nigerians in diaspora can't vote, INEC Chair Yakubu explains at Chatham House, says elections will hold as scheduled. And to the front page of the Nigerian News Direct now. Technical error fears INEC to conduct mock test of beavers nationwide. Eyes body odor identification technology. We are really comfortable where we are. INEC boss speaking says commission won't wait until main elections to test system integrity. All the details on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct. And to the First News newspaper now. Young people hold the aces in 2023 election. INEC chairman speaking. He speaks as Chatham House as youth will dominate February poll. They have the numbers. All right. You find all of the details when you look through the front page of the First News newspaper. Mike.
All right, I have Daily Trust here, and it's focusing on Boko Haram. It says, we spent $1 billion to retrieve territories. Buhari is revealing this and says terrorism financiers want to split Nigeria. Right, we spent $1 billion to retrieve territories. Recall that at the inception of this administration in 2015, some territories were under Boko Haram with their flags hoisted. But he's saying, the president is saying, they spent $1 billion to ensure all that doesn't happen. They had to take back the territory of Nigeria. From there, let's go to Daily Times. Daily Times is saying that the federal government issues certificate of registration to Konwa and Namda. Recall that the strike by ASU had given expedited, some would say it was an expedited action to register new associations, but they said they've been on ground before the time. Federal government issues certificate of registration to Konoa and Namda, gazettes both unions to operate alongside other varsity-based organizations. Set to pay ASU's rival unions 8 months withheld salary. Okay, recall that Konoa said that they were not on strike as much as the universities were closed. A lot of them were closed, but they were not on strike. So this is paying to that. Now, let's go to Nature News. Energy firm, low carbon investments will hit $620 billion in 2023. A report is saying that on the Nature News. Energy firm, low carbon investments will hit $620 billion in 2023. All right, from there, let's go to Business Day. Business Day says, the big story says, banks, fintechs tap cashless policy for growth. Banks, fintechs tap cashless policy for growth. Recall that the central bank is coming up with a cashless policy and getting deeper into it. The Leadership newspaper is the last one we're looking at right now, and is focusing on the Daba hotel bombing. Recall this some time ago. Mystery around Baguda Kautho's death unresolved 27 years after. All right? That's what they say. A mystery around Baguda Kautho's death unresolved 27 years after. Right? This is what the Leadership newspaper has. Veronica.
All right, Mike, let's look at the story that is on a majority of the papers this morning as we come down to the elections. And the INEC chair, Mahmood Yakubu, was at Chatham House, and he spoke on a majority of issues, just to let perhaps the international community know that Nigeria is prepared. And as the commission, spearheading the election, it is ready, talking about the level of preparedness. And he spoke about the numbers, talking about that up from the 93.4 million registered voters, that the youth make up 70.4 million, and so they hold the aces, as quoted by one of the papers this morning. They hold the aces for the 2023 election, and that they will determine how the election would go at the end of the day. And then he talked about the possibility of a runoff for the election, that in the last 3 election cycles, they have always prepared for a runoff. In case there is no winner, they have made the possibility for a runoff. And then for the IREF, beavers, and all of the mechanism it has come up with to enhance the integrity of the elections, it is going to check that. There's going to be a mock, test of all of this mechanism to ensure that the integrity is intact ahead of the elections. And he talked about diaspora voting, of course, being in the diaspora. This conversation about when will the diaspora be a part of the election process. And he made it clear that the Nigerian law does not give room for that for now. But he is certain that in the coming days, that will change. He's confident that that will change because there's a policy in the works to addressing that. And so Nigerians in the diaspora should keep their fingers crossed.
Yeah. I remember interviewing the INEC chairman some time ago, and he said all of those have been prepared, but the only thing that would prevent them from deploying is the law. Because they have to work within the
ambit of the law,
the ambit of the law that permits them to do this or not, as the case may be.
Yeah.
So when it comes to diaspora voting, when it comes to staggered election or staggered voting, where we can vote beyond one day, so that people like you and I, who are always busy on election day, since the last, in fact. Since the last 20 years, one has always, in fact, every cycle, we're always in the studio.
Journalists are always in the studio on the field, as it is.
Security agencies, and there are also medical personnel, and all of that. A lot of them, and then the agent, because INEC, as an institution, visits some other countries, in South Africa, in Kenya, and they always go there to also be observers to see how the election is conducted.
And how they can bring that to improve
So they
our
come
process.
back here to simulate some of those things. So INEC prepares all of those things ahead of time, keeping them in the coolers, waiting for when the law will say, now you can do this. And then if it is checked, and then they now deploy. So I am glad that INEC is preparing in that regard. But in this election particularly, one of the things he said at the Chatham House that a lot of persons give some level of credence when he was saying, we are ready for this election, we are not postponing, we're not shifting, we're not rescheduling, we are ready for the election. That is not to say that, okay, some, I's will not be dotted and T's crossed, and so on. Now, when it comes to the beavers, he said that they are trying to simulate that, to ensure that everything is intact. Then another thing he talked about was the issue of monitoring the spending of money by political parties.
Yes.
He's saying they are deploying mechanisms, they are deploying all of these technological strategies to ensure that they keep an eye on what's going on based on what the powers the law has given them. So it tells us that, INEC is kind of strategically positioned to conduct this next election in a way that Nigerians will feel it is credible. Another thing that he also talked about, I remember, is the issue of catering, for the visually impaired.
Yes.
People who are people with disability and all of that, there are going to be braille materials for them, for all of them to be included in the process of voting, and even those who might help to conduct the elections. So INEC is prepared for all of those, which is a good thing.
And he spoke about the attacks. Between 2019 to this year, last year, I want to believe, they have had about 50 attacks on INEC facility, these arsonist attacks, and that had generated a lot of concern. I guess that is why he needed to clear the air as well with regards to the level of preparedness, that despite these attacks, INEC is ready to conduct the election. There is no postponement whatsoever. But then my concern is with the numbers. The youth are said to hold the aces. Will they use their aces like we have seen in previous years where we do not see them turn out for elections? Now that they know, will they make good use of it?
If you check elections, in fact, in Nigerian elections, since inception, the youth have always been the ones holding the aces. All elections, check the numbers. The difference between the past election and now is that for every election, general election cycle, the number of younger Nigerians begin to increase and it swells. That is what is making the difference. Otherwise, the youth have always been the ones holding the aces.
Right.
So the point there is that how different this is going to be now, because when
it's my issue. That's why I asked that question.
No, but the point there is, even around the world, there is no way that everybody who registers for election votes.
Right.
Anything could happen.
Well, speaking about specifically the youths, but I hope that they turn things around, because that's a concern for a majority of Nigerians.
Yeah.
All right.